I wanted to get your story of how you started writing your books. I know that there was a story behind it.
Yeah, yeah. The publishing journey, right? Okay.
Right.
So um I started even when I was still in a wheelchair, I started working with people about how to heal and become self-realized. And eventually there were so many people I was working with, they just kept saying, you need to write a book. You need so everyone knows the ascended frequency healing technique and all these understandings. So I said, yeah, you're right. I'll write a book. So I wrote the first book, Supercharged Self-Healing. I wrote it, and I wanted to find a publisher only because I wanted it to be in bookstores. I wanted it to be readily available. And there's a certain that's the right word. Like if you have a publisher, it's kind of like the work is elevated a little bit because a publisher had to believe in the work and that kind of thing. It's kind of like also getting an agent, right? For a publisher to look at your work, you kind of have to have an agent, which is even more difficult than getting a publishing deal.
Hmm.
Okay. So the point is, I wrote the book and I did all this supercharged and I did all this research about what publishers I could send my manuscript to unsolicited without an agent because I didn't have an agent. There's only like 300 or 350 agents in
I
totality. It's
know it's
crazy.
ridiculous. Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy.
Hmm.
So I started researching what publishers I could just send my manuscript to, and it was a very small list, right? And most of them were very small publishers. But at that point, I didn't really care. I just wanted to get it out there, and I just wanted a publisher to kind of justify the level of my work by having a publisher believe in it, right? Okay. So after about a year, I finally had Ozark Mountain Publishing. Ozark Mountain Publishing said, "Wow, this is great. We'd love to
Dolores
publish your."
Cannon.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd love to publish your work, RJ. It's fantastic. This is great. Here's a contract. So I mean, I had a party. I was like, finally, after writing the book and a year of trying, right? So I got the publishing contract. Brian, I don't know what a publishing, now I do, but I don't know what a publishing contract should look like. I don't know what's fair, I have no idea. No clue, right? So I'm like, okay, sort of a dream has come true. And now I don't know what to do because I don't know if I should sign the contract or not. I don't know if this is a good contract or this is a bad contract, right? So I'm like, well, what do I do now? So then I started researching agents that would accept query letters from people that had written a book and that were open to new submissions. So I went through a gigantic list of those people, started sending out, say, hey, I got a contract and blah blah blah. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I. And most of them just said, I'm not taking on any new clients. Not taking on any clients. Probably about 100 of them said that. Well, this one agent said, you know what? I'll take a look at your contract, RJ, and I'll let you know if it's legit or not or whatever. So I sent her the contract. She must have replied in like 20 minutes. She's like, RJ, this is a totally legitimate contract. You're totally okay to sign it. But I'll tell you what, your book and your story is intriguing. Do you want to send me your book and I'll read it over the weekend? So I said, really? Over the weekend, you'll read it, not 6 months from now, you get back to me. She laughed. I said, no, I will read it over the weekend. What you've told me already is fascinating. So you send me the book, I'll read it, and I'll let you know what I think. Great. I sent it to her. It was about 18 hours later. About 18 hours later. This conversation was on Friday, Saturday, like by around noon. She was calling me back. She's like, RJ, let me just tell you something. Whatever you do, don't sign that contract. Why? You just said it was totally okay. Why would I not sign it? She said, listen, you have a bestseller, an unbelievable book, but the whole thing has to be rewritten. The whole thing has to be rewritten. You wrote it like a memoir. No one is interested in that. You got to get to the healing technique right away, and you got to get to all the clients that you've helped with the healing technique. You have to rewrite the book. Her name's Tina. I said, Tina, I spent a year writing the book. I spent another year getting a publisher. I spent months trying to even getting a hold of someone like yourself. It's been 2.5 years already. You tell me to rewrite the whole thing? She goes, yeah. And she says, if you rewrite the book and you take it to the level that I think that you can, I'll represent you and I'll get you a really good publishing deal. So I said, okay, great. So you're going to sign me right now? She goes, I'm not going to sign you right now. You got to you got to rewrite the whole thing, send it to me. And if I think it's good enough that I can go to market with it, then I'll sign you as a client. So I said, all right, let me think about it, Tina. Let me think about it. I don't know if I want to rewrite the whole book. So let me think about it. So I thought about it and I knew she was right. I knew she was right. I was trying to convince myself to avoid rewriting the whole book. I rewrote the whole book. Took me about took me about 2 months, 2.5 months to rewrite the whole thing. Sent it to her. Tina, we're ready to rock and roll. She's like, unfortunately, no. This is just, it's
Oh
not good
wow.
enough. It's just
Yeah.
not good enough. That's what I said. I go, oh wow. So what do we do? She goes, here's some changes I need you to make. It's not good enough, RJ. I'm just telling you, it's not. Not the healing technique, and not, but the book itself. It's not good enough. You got to rewrite it again. Here's some notes. So at that point, I'm like, this is crazy. So I followed her advice. I took another 6 weeks, made all these changes, sent it to her. What do you think she said? Not quite there,
Oh
RJ.
wow.
No, this is a true story. I should have her talk about this. Not quite there, RJ. You're almost there. You're almost there. I know what publishers will buy right away. I know what
Mhm.
they'll buy. They won't buy this. You're almost there. Here's a few more notes. So I did that. I rewrote it again. Now we're like 3 years since getting a contract. 3 years later, right? three
Mhm.
years late. No, well, not since getting a contract. The whole thing is about a 3 year process. I finally send her another version. She's like, we're ready to go. We're absolutely ready to go. I say, okay, fantastic. She sends me over. I sign with her, right? She goes, okay, I'm going to go to market. I'm going to go to this publisher, and this publisher. We're going to hear something pretty soon. I guarantee it. I said, okay, fine. COVID hits the next week. Everything shuts down. Everything stops. Everything
Mhm.
stops. I'm like, Tina, what does this mean? She goes, I have no idea. I have no idea. I can't get a hold of anybody. No one's in their offices. I have no idea. About 2 weeks later, she gets a note from two publishers and said that we can't all get together. We can't have a board meeting to decide. She goes, but I just want you to know we are absolutely very interested in supercharged self healing. These two publishers, and they said just let the decks clear a little bit with COVID and all this kind of stuff, and then we'll be back in touch with you. So a couple more months go by, and then as it turns out, these two publishers kind of fought over it, which was kind of like a best case scenario in that they both wanted it.
Right.
And then we eventually went with Llewellyn Publishing after all that. That that Brian is the journey of my first book and what it took, how long it took, the circuitous route that it took. The good news is, as I said, it's going into its ninth printing, which is absolutely incredible. The second book I wrote, I wrote in 30 days, and I had an agreement 2 days after it was sent in. So I've had both,
Mhm.
and that's what
The
happened.
both, yeah.
So I've had an eternity of having no idea and can't get a book deal to literally, I mean, we sent it to them on Friday. On Monday, they sent over a contract. So both both things can happen, but it was meant to be that I had to put that much work in. It was meant to be that Tina and I worked together. There's a lot of history between us as souls. She was meant to help me. She was meant to bring it out there. And I'm so glad. Obviously, at this point, while I was doing it, I was like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I should have just taken that first contract. So, but it turned out to be the best thing I ever could have done. And I think it's reached so many people now. I'm so glad that it happened that way. But that's the story
Yeah.
of the publishing of Supercharged Self Healing.
I think it's important to share just because also in the people that watch my channel, there's some amazing writers.
Yeah.
And they're going through a similar story and don't give up on it. If you have to rewrite it, do it.
Right.
And that just listen to that story and know that you can still do it. It's important. So
Yeah. Anything worth doing will require effort. There's no doubt about it. And
sure.
that really tested me. I mean, many times I'm like, why I'm still working on this.
I
I
mean,
had
it
a deal.
amazes me when you look at like Isaac Asimov, who was
Mhm.
who was pumping out like 12 books a year, and some of these like Stephen King, who can just like crank out these books. It's amazing what they do. Because writing is a laborious process. It's difficult. It's hard, right?
Very. It is, but it's like meditation.
It
It's
is.
a muscle. And that's why I wanted to point out that the second book, I Change Your Mind, which debuted as a bestseller. I literally wrote that book. As crazy as I wrote that book in a month because I had gotten good through super self healing,
Right.
rewriting and do it again, RJ, do it again, RJ. So I had developed a muscle of writing, and I was able to literally, put a pretty good book together in a very short period of time. And the third book that comes out, Access Superconscious, comes out in August.
Hmm.
I mean, it was a little longer than a month, but it didn't take me that long either. I mean, I think maybe that took about 7 weeks for me to write that book. And that's what starts to happen. It's just like with you and meditation, Brian. You'd meditate for hours and hours, and now you realize I'm in meditation. I'm already there.
Hmm.
So anyone who has a passion about their work, about their book, or whatever it is, don't give up. Absolutely don't give up. And you may be thrown curveball after curveball after rewrite it, rewrite it, rewrite it, rewrite it. That's okay. If you know that you need to do this, if you believe in the work so much, then follow through. It'll be worth it no matter what, I promise.
Thank you for sharing that because I know that there's some great writers that are going to be inspired by that, and they need to hear it. I mean, the
Yeah.
spiritual community itself eats itself a little bit. You know what I mean? And there's also another observation from that in my own experience in writing is write it a little bit for yourself. You're writing it for someone else, but don't let your ego get caught up in the writing experience because that's when it's not genuine. When you're trying to write it thinking, "Oh, I need to do this as I need to do it a certain way," and that's kind of maybe how your first as you tuned into it more and more, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't you weren't writing for someone else. You were writing it for yourself, right?
Yeah, that's an absolute great point. The more that you can stay true to who and what you really are, the more powerful and authentic the work will be. And I hadn't developed the writing muscle enough as RJ that it took me several attempts to write it, write it, rewrite it, rewrite it, rewrite it. And like I said, then we got to the point where the book, so book three comes out, book four is already January of 2026. The books almost now write themselves. They almost now write themselves. I'm not going to say there's no effort because that's not true.
Hmm.
But if you compare it to sort of the torturous rewriting and trying to make things work in terms of supercharge, so part of the problem, Brian, was that I wasn't making it accessible enough. And that was the feedback from Tina. She's like, RJ, you understand these things, but I got to tell you, no one understands these things. You do. And you're writing it as if everyone already understands it. You
Hmm.
have to keep quote unquote dumbing it down. So it's so simple, like the I am discourse. So it's so
Hmm.
simple that anyone would understand it. And that was the hardest thing for me. That was the absolute hardest thing for me was to make it so accessible for anyone who reads it. But if you stick with it and you keep doing it, we get good at what we do repetitively. Plain and
It's
simple,
true.
no matter what that is. I've written so much, so many articles. I've written, I don't even know how many articles at this point. I'm working on book five now. They almost just not write themselves, but it's this glorious, graceful, as opposed to the first time, there
Yeah.
was nothing glorious or graceful about it. It's now glorious and graceful, but just anybody who's struggling with, just stick with it. It's worth it. I promise.
Do you have a routine? Do you write in the mornings or at night or every day or a certain period of time or how do you do it?
Ju- Inspiration.
Inspiration when you're ready.
When it hits, right? I literally tell my partner, and I said, listen, I got to write this book. And she's like, oh, okay, okay.
Right,
So,
right, yeah.
I mean, that's what I got to write this book. So,
It's
so
almost I've heard it described in my favorite description. It's like a bowel movement. It has to come out. It has to come out, right?
yeah, and you know it. Like you will know, just like you gotta go to the bathroom. When you know that you have to give birth to this, it's got to come out. And I'm fortunate that through all the work that I've done, I'm in a position where if I say, hey, listen, for the next 6 weeks, I'm just going to write. I'm just going to write, write, write. So anything that I got going on, just reschedule or this or that, because I got to get this whole thing out. And I found once you've developed that muscle, that first draft, after you've developed the muscle,
Hmm.
that first draft is often spectacular because you've ironed out the kinks already through all the other projects that you've written. It's like you know how to say it now, and it just comes through.
Hmm.
But for me, I just write on inspiration. I never say to myself, "Oh, I should probably write another book." I don't think I've ever had that thought, but I have been literally taken over. Where I'm like, I gotta write this right now.
Hmm.
I gotta write this book, and I literally will start writing it the next day. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna write this book.
Yeah,
So, some people might not have that. They got to go to their job or whatever that is, right?
right.
Find the time when you're most inspired. When you're most
Hmm.
inspired. When I was in my 20s and I had a regular full-time job, I used to write at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's how I'd write. I'd write for 2 or 3 hours, then go to work all day. and then actually have some kind of energy drink and try to write for another hour or two at night. So sometimes it takes that kind of dedication, but right when you're most energetic and you're most clear-headed, the work will be reflective of that. Don't write when you're stressed out, tired, exhausted, and don't write as an afterthought. Almost make it the most important thing, even if you have a job.
Hmm.
This is just what's worked for me. I always made what I was creating the most important thing, and anything after what I was creating was always secondary for me.